I'm going to be talking about two different tools today. We're going to be working with the bucket tool and the paintbrush tool. These two tools are called roster tools. They change their color using the exact same way, that top foreground color box. We're not starting at the top. I've already talked to you about the zoom tool, and bucket tool is the first one we're going to talk about. So you're going to click on the bucket and you're going to click on the canvas, and it will change to whatever your foreground color box is. I'm going to click on the bucket and just play around. I would recommend taking a couple of minutes, maybe pause this if you haven't done this already, and get some practice on using your bucket tool. The bucket tool flood fills an area that until it hits the only boundaries on this bucket tool is the edges of the actual canvas or file that we have created. However, if there were any other type of boundaries, it would be contained within the area. And what creates boundaries are the lines or just areas of any other color. But bucket tool just flood fills an entire area, like I said, until it hits some kind of boundary. The brush tool. Now, if I go to paint immediately, you're going to think, oh, it's not working. It is working. I'm painting in the exact same color as the background, so I don't see anything. I need to, before I start to paint, I need to change my brush color in the same way that I changed my bucket, by clicking on that foreground color box. And now I can paint whatever it is I would like to. From art, think about, is there only one type of brush in the world? And the answer is no. This is where we're going to start to get into using our tool options. And I'm going to start from the right to the left. And this first couple of tools we're really not going to get into. The tool we might be using at different points is opacity. Now this word should sound familiar to you. Not only have you maybe talked about it in art, but you also have talked about it probably in science. It is the amount that you are able to see through something. So if something is at 100% opacity, you can't see through it. You can see that I've drawn over both of these two lines and you can't see the line behind it. That's because the lines are set to 100% opacity. But if I drop down my opacity, the color is going to get lighter, and it's going to allow you to actually see through the color that's laid down. This can be useful when you are trying to change the color of something, but you still want to see what the actual object beneath is. We'll get more into this as we start working with images. In the meantime, I'm going to bring my opacity all the way up. Mode. Mode is something we're never going to change. We're not going to worry about that. This is a technique that if you really want to know more about it, you can take my 8th grade elective in 2 years when you get to choose your electives. So if you ever change mode, know that your tool is not going to work the way you want it to. Size. Hopefully that's kind of self-explanatory. The size of the brush is exactly just that. And as you mouse over your document, you can see the ghost image of the size of the brush. Now you'll notice that this brush doesn't fill the whole ghost image. That's the next thing I'm going to explain, but let me finish up with size. Now, the size of the brush can get incredibly large, and right now you don't see the ghost image. The reason is the brush is bigger than the canvas. So let me move this around a little bit, and there you go. You can see that it is extremely large. I will warn you, playing around with an extremely large brush and trying to continually to paint when there's nothing to paint on, Photoshop has a tendency to freeze and close. I don't recommend that you try and paint with a really large brush. There's really no point to it. Can you single click to create some kind of dimension? The answer is yes. and if the hardness of the brush is different, it can become basically the same thing as the bucket tool and flood fill, but not worry about all of the different boundaries of different colors. It just kind of allows you to create a bit of a clean slate if you do a single clip with a very large brush to paint over everything. Let me get back into some of the brushes. This is the thumbnail of your preview of your brush. You'll notice that there's a down arrow. Down arrow always means more options. As you click down, you will notice there is a series of brushes. If you grab this bottom right corner, you can expand the window so you can see everything if it's not showing you everything. It will also give you a scroll box if you need to scroll to see. I like to make the window a little bit larger so I can see all of my brushes at once. As you mouse through the brushes, just like with the tools, the software tells you about the tool. I was using what's called a soft round brush. That is what was giving me, and let me change my color because right now you're not going to be able to see anything. That's what gave me the soft edges around the outside. The color actually does continue to stretch, but it fades out to the edge of the brush. If I were to change to, and right now my size is 65, so I'm going to do the same thing, a hard brush, and set my size to 65 and click next to it, you're going to see that it has a very solid edge and it is a larger, looks like a larger size. That is because there's a difference between soft and hard. Many of your different brushes have different textures and they can create different dimensions. Single click creates one thing, a click and drag creates something else. Some of them have different types of opacity, so you will see that some of the brushes are softer. You can't change the opacity of a softer brush, and some of them are what's called scatter brushes. The thumbnail will show you that the brush is all scattered around, and when you click and drag, you have directionality, but not exactly where it goes. If you single click, you might be able to put something where you want it to. However, not all of the brushes. For example, this leaf brush is also a scatter brush, and you can see where I'm clicking. However, the leaves are like scattering about. So this will give you a different effect. And you can see the different opacity. This brush has a very low opacity. The only thing you can do is lower it more as opposed to raise it. And there is your effect. I'm going to undo my number one best friend. Now, the thing with undo eventually stops working, and you can notice that I still have something on there. So undo isn't necessarily unlimited. Also, if you save and close and come back the next day, undo is completely wiped. In that case, then I would need to change to a different way to get rid of this. Could I go to my bucket tool and flood fill? Well, you can see that it's not flood filling. Why? Because there are boundaries of the colors. So I'm going to take my brush and make it a hard brush and make it large, and I'm just going to paint that out. Back to the paintbrush tool. And let me change the color again. With the brushes, you will notice at the top that it says default brushes. Again, another down arrow. And there are tons of other different categories. And if you think of it outside the box, some of them can give you different dimensions of things to create different images of your liking. But there are a lot of different characters, and some of them actually have an image on their own that makes them more of a stamp as opposed to a brush. brush. But you could click and drag and paint accordingly. One of the other things that you can do with the brush tool, I want to paint all this over. My undo isn't going all the way back to get rid of everything. With the paint brush, I'm going to go to my foreground color. And right now, if I move off of this dialog box and I move on to my canvas, my cursor will change to the dropper tool. It doesn't look like this for you right now. However, it is activated once I move off of the canvas. I'm going to click on my canvas, and the dropper tool will allow me to select the color within the canvas. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to change my brush back to my default brushes, go back to a hard brush, make my size much larger, and paint away the things that are in here. You might be tempted to use the eraser, but the eraser isn't going to work the way that you want it to. We are going to talk about the eraser later on, but the eraser does not work on a single layered document. Play around with the couple of tools that you've learned. Try and make a scene. You can not really working on making your actual assignment just yet. You are merely practicing. Good luck.